When Gilgeous-Alexander missed this key free throw at the end of Game 4 last night, I got a little excited because it put us firmly into the foul up by 3 scenario that I've been telling you guys about for years and years. Now, this strategy isn't anything new. We even saw it at the birth of the three-point shot back in 1981 when the Celtics fouled Dr. J rather than let him shoot a 3 to tie the game in the Eastern Conference Finals. The NBA is littered with game-tying shots when a foul would have avoided it, like in the 1995 Finals when all Orlando had to do in Game 1 was to foul Kenny Smith, and instead they let him shoot the 3, and the favored Magic got swept in the series. And how could we forget last year's conference finals when the Pacers had basically stolen Game 1 on the parquet, only to allow Jaylen Brown to shoot the corner 3 to tie it. And who knows what would have happened to this 4-game sweep had Indiana just won the first game on the road. When the Thunder executed this strategy last night, it seemed to trigger a lot of people and led to calls to change the rules to ban it. But I think it wasn't because of the first foul they took, since that one was a foul to give, and it wasn't even the second one, since we've come so accustomed to how sound the tactic is. I suspect the reason people got upset was that there was still enough time to get one more shot, and this was the foul that ended any hope of a thrilling ending. What made this so anticlimactic was that the Timberwolves didn't have any timeouts left, so it allowed plenty of space for the Thunder to wind the clock down before following Anthony Edwards near half court. But I don't see how fans were disappointed by the ending, considering it got pretty crazy when Edwards missed the free throw on purpose. First off, kudos to everyone behind the shooter for waiting until the release before stepping inside the three-point line, and then an incredibly heads-up play to toss the ball down court to let the clock run out. This is reminiscent of the genius of Magic Johnson tossing the ball down court to prevent the Blazers from stopping the clock one last time in this series-clinching win. But then, even more high IQ when the fan grabs the ball to stop the clock from completely expiring, giving his team one last sliver of hope. I was curious why the Wolves didn't have one last timeout left, so I went back and checked why they called their earlier timeouts. The first one in the fourth quarter was in response to this play, where we can't quite see why Naz Reid is in such a bad position on the ball screen for SGA, but Reid is essentially screening his teammate, who wants to go under. Great recovery to contest, but an even greater wraparound pass to the popping Chet Holmgren. And we realize this was a called play by Thunder coach Mark Daniel, as Cason Wallace is screening the help rotation long enough so Chet can get this off clean. And this wasn't the first time OKC took advantage of the SGA Chet pick and pop, as Naz shadows the ball to lure it out of his hands, but is powerless to close out back to Chet, who spins into the lane and throws down the hammer with authority. This ended up a two-pointer, and Finch decided to call a timeout after the mini 4-0 run. I don't know if it was the best use of a momentum-busting break in the action, but let's see what he called in the huddle to decide if it was worth it. They choose a horn set with Edwards flaring out from the elbow to the wing for the pass. Alexander Walker follows for a pass back, which is a good action, but I don't understand why he just throws it right back to Edwards for an inside ball screen from Rudy. Why not have Edwards fake this handoff, which might lure Lou Dort to step towards Nickeil and then give Edwards a step around the ball screen? As a result, there's no advantage gained by the first ball screen, so they have to flip it and try again. Rudy almost commits a crucial foul on an illegal screen because Dort is so darn good at navigating them. And if you don't believe me about the potential foul, Dort drew no less than 2 of these during the game, all because of how hard he pursues around the screens, being physical, but also driving his feet quickly to run around the screener, forcing them to add a little extra to try and provide some relief for Edwards. But there just wasn't enough contact to merit a whistle on this one, so Edwards snakes his way into the lane. Check the Gortat screen from Gobert as he runs a phalanx on Chet, but then we get a crucial call. As Edwards releases the pass to the open shooter, he runs right into SGA, who was closing out to the corner. We've seen this kind of call a million times where the passer continues his route and runs into a defender, essentially setting an illegal screen, and the ref has little choice but to call it, despite being the fourth quarter of a tight playoff game. That's too much contact to ignore to give the offense a massive advantage of a wide-open corner 3. To get back to Lou Dort's play for a second, there is no denying his incredible defensive effort combined with the linebacker's body, which makes life hell for anyone he's guarding. But he also got called for 2 fouls when trying to recklessly dive after loose balls that he doesn't realistically have much hope of corralling into a possession. Coaches for too long have trained players to get on the floor for every single loose ball, no matter the situation, when I believe there are plenty of instances where staying on your feet to accelerate is much more optimal. I have the utmost respect for this willingness to sacrifice his body, but he also needs to be more careful about potential injuries he can be inflicting to opponents' knees. There was no hope to get the ball on this one with the dive, and the second one, I have a rule that you should never dive if the opponent is between you and the ball, even if he's able to get a fingertip on it, which could maybe bat it to a teammate. It's simply not worth the risk of ending someone's career, as well as the worst position to put your team in by accruing personal fouls. A big story in this game is Anthony Edwards only taking 2 shots in the first half, and him and Julius Randle combining for a mere 20 shots. They only combined for 20 or less shots twice this season, and one was a meaningless blowout in March of the hapless 76ers. While this was a close game that the Wolves had a chance to win, a big reason why the Thunder did control the game for almost the whole time was because Ant wasn't a big enough impact overall. And it started with our old friend Lou Dort. You can see him immediately move to outright deny Edwards the ball near half court. This play was weird and leads me to believe something wasn't executed like the coaches intended, as the get action to Randle leads to the kind of cross screen you'd set to get a post up. Yet they do this for Mike Conley? Now you're depending on Rudy Gobert to be a dribble artist, with Dort playing physical defense with some holding. But Edwards has got his hands on Dort as well, so as long as it dissipates quickly, the refs are willing to let it go, especially considering it's the first play of the game. Now, the shot clock is winding down and Isaiah Hartenstein can show, while Rudy definitely sets an illegal screen they could have called. Rarely do you see Edwards hit Rudy with the roll pass, and the answer why should be pretty self-explanatory. This Randle lift to the wing didn't seem to be a big deal at the time, but it invites the switch of Dort onto him. When McDaniels couldn't create a shot off the middle drive through the lane, they've now got a suboptimal ISO matchup with Randle against Dort. This is perfect positional defense to show your chest and cut off the ball handler multiple times, with contact deemed marginal as Dort is in perfect legal guarding position. Randle has no choice but to throw a grenade to the corner, and it's a good example of a surefire Randle shot being turned away by great defense. The more OKC can prevent Ant from shooting, the better, even if they see many role players going off. Minnesota wants to get Dort off of his hand-to-hand combat mode at midcourt, so they send Gobert up the screen very high. By Conley randomly cutting through and doubling back to the left corner, it brings SGA right into the help defense. And Chet will also load up to protect the rim, so Edwards makes the right decision here to generate the coveted wide-open corner 3, where the Thunder will take their chances with the non-stars. But there are some fundamental issues with the Wolves' offense that probably didn't bother them at all in the regular season or against inferior defenses in the playoffs, but not so with the vaunted pressure cooker in OKC. Look how slow they are getting into their attack as J-Dub is putting pressure right at half court on Randle. There's not a lot of urgency to get into positions as they opt for a very ho-hum high pick and roll with Rudy. The spacing is terrible on the right side as Randle rejects the screen to go to his weak hand, where he fumbles the dribble before Dort jumps him, forcing Randle to throw a totally off-target pass that turns into a bad turnover. It's easy to point to the box score numbers and say turnovers are what did them in, considering OKC scored 22 points off the Wolves' miscues. But it turns out the Wolves scored even more off of OKC's turnovers. But the point still stands that the offensive concepts of Chris Finch's offense can be suboptimal, especially in the absence of a true point guard. McDaniels pushes it up, but then sets an inside ball screen to Randle's weaker right hand. He again fumbles that dribble under a little duress and goes right into Caruso, who promptly takes it away. They rely on horns when they want to get the whole team involved in the attack, and this inside ball screen with DiVincenzo is a good idea considering it's a guard who's getting the short roll. But Randle simply cannot lift out of the corner here. It eliminates the release valve for the roll man and allows Jalen Williams to bump down to the main target under the basket as SGA hustles to the right wing and Dante is left in the air with no options. Because they have to use Edwards as a point guard, his field goal attempts can be severely limited as he first has to deal with full court pressure, but then has to play the lead guard role of passing to begin the play, which was a double pin down for Dante to curl on, but it gets blown up when Edwards decides to probe the defense. That probe does not work because they're using Rudy to set a pin down above the three-point line, allowing Hartenstein to ignore him and stop the ball. Now they're getting their rookie to create off the dribble. This probably should have been a foul on SGA, but it's close, and we know that rookies don't always get a great whistle in big playoff games, leading to another possession where Ant is left to stand near half court as a spectator, completely uninvolved and off screen. This OKC team as a defense is incredibly versatile, and there's virtually no one you can force a switch onto and feel great about the mismatch. They can guard Rudy with Caruso, and that just leaves Randle and Conley playing with their food out top for 8 seconds because there simply is no advantage to be gained against SGA and J-Dub. Conley randomly cuts through, which allows SGA to break off and double the back down from Randle. There's not a lot of good choices for a guy who's not a great post passer, and at least Edwards got a shot out of this, but it's the worst shot he could possibly take as OKC built their biggest lead. The only way to consistently get good shots against a defense like this requires a 5-man motion with a purpose, and the Wolves simply don't know how to run that enough times. We got a glimpse of it at the end of the first as they ran a great set to take advantage of the denial defense on Edwards. The handoff into blind pig where Rudy flashes underneath Edwards, who breaks off Rudy for the handoff and is immediately downhill for the and one layup. But way too often, we get stagnant offense without enough passing or movement to penetrate the defense, and it would lead to a low percentage shot. Meanwhile, they've got a true MVP on their team who hit 4 of his last 7 shots and did a little bit of everything down the stretch to will his team to a victory. They can set a ball screen to force a switch and get Naz Reid onto SGA, and clearing out the top for him will almost always yield a great shot as he steps back with the right-left to get space and drop in a midi for a crucial 5-point lead. And I think the Wolves got a false sense of security after their blowout Game 3 win, since we're back to letting SGA have his way without any defensive adjustments like sending a second defender early to get it out of his hands, and then outright deny it back to him. Well, gee, I wonder where I got this concept from. As a result, you have some extra defenders kind of showing you the ball, but this isn't going to get it out of his hands as he just turns around and hits another MVP shot. And while this play ended up being an insane and improbable backbreaker, it was the failure to prevent it from happening in the first place that frustrates me. Of course, they're going to target Rudy on the perimeter, so this means they should do something to double him quick, get it out of his hands, and then rotate to recover. Instead, they allow the dance to happen, and even though it gets ugly for Shea, he squirts it to Williams wide open from behind the arc for the dagger. And before you insist his pivot foot moved for a travel call, let's carefully examine the footwork. As he drives, we can see that he ends the dribble with the left foot down. This is not the pivot foot yet. He then lands on a jump stop. Either of his feet can be the pivot, and once his right foot slides, the left foot becomes the pivot. From here, it never moves from its spot, which is incredible, and the presence of mind to get it to the open shooter means we've got a special player on our hands that deserves the kind of respect we reserve for the greats. And it's because of him and his gravity that he entrances McDaniels to put himself in absolute no man's land while his man is one pass away spotting up for the shot that should go down as the one that ended the series. So, start booking your finals trip, OKC fans. This series is over, as the Thunder are a more talented team, but also better coached. And those two things are too hard to overcome when you're as deep as the Western Conference Finals.